She had just finished wiping the last crystal glass when the yell pierced the air. "Are you completely useless?" The voice thundered. Every head in the restaurant turned. Elena stood frozen, a linen napkin clutched in her hand, as the billionaire's words sliced through the evening calm like a knife. But it wasn't the insult that stunned them. It was her reply, one quiet sentence that would change everything. Elena Rivera wasn't new to wealth not her own. Of course, she had dusted it, served it, folded it, and sometimes cried behind it. Magnolia Hill Estate was a luxurious southern mansion turned restaurant resort, a place where the rich came to feel more refined than they already were. Elena, she came to work. Her morning started the same as always. Up at 5 a.m., a quick whisper of a prayer beside her daughter Ava's tiny bed, a half cup of reheated coffee, then to buses and a walk to the service gate. By 7, she was already polishing the cutlery. No one noticed unless it smudged. Her black shoes clicked quietly over the polished floors as she moved like a shadow through the side hall of the grand dining room. She carried a grace most dancers envied, though no one clapped for her here. Her apron was spotless, hair pulled back tight, eyes alert but soft. Today was supposed to be a normal Tuesday, but when the general manager, Leo, pulled her aside, just afternoon, her breath had caught. VIP tonight, private dining room, backup staff, just in case, he said, without looking her in the eye. That includes you. She didn't ask who, she knew better than to question. By 4 p.m. Word had spread in quiet glances. Lucas Vance was the guest. The name carried weight, like thunder before a storm. A tech billionaire who had disappeared from the public eye after a scandal involving his company's hostile takeover. Some said he fired half his employees in one day. Others said he walked out of a board meeting and never returned. Now he lived quietly in a nearby estate. But rumors swirled that tonight, for some unknown reason, he had requested a private dinner. At Magnolia Hill, his first public appearance in 3 years. Elena had never met him, but she'd seen his photo. The kind of man who wore silence like a crown and arrogance like a second skin. At exactly 6:58 p.m. The tall oak doors opened. Lucas Vance walked in like he owned more than the room, like he owned the air people breathed. Sharp suit, expensive, but understated. No entourage, no smile. Elena stood in a corner near the service table, hands clasped, invisible. She knew how to be invisible. Life had taught her well. He didn't greet anyone, simply glanced at the table setup, frowned slightly, and took his seat without a word. The staff froze in place. Even the executive chef paused at the kitchen doorway. The tension hung thick. Elena exhaled slowly. Her job was to remain in the background only, step in if needed. But fate had other plans. It was a rookie server, Julia, who brought out the wrong wine pairing, a 2012 Merlot instead of the 2010 Bordeaux he'd requested. A 2-year difference no normal person would notice, but Lucas Vance noticed. He picked up the glass, swirled it once, took a small sip and then slammed it down on the table so hard the crystal rang out like a bell. "What is this?" he barked. Julia, barely 19, stammered. I believe it's the Merlot. I asked for the 2010 Bordeaux." His voice was cold. "Do you think I'm stupid, or are you just incompetent?" The room held its breath. Julia's hands trembled as her eyes began to well. Elena, from across the room, stepped forward without thinking, quiet, smooth, like a wave of calm walking into the storm. "I'll take care of it," she said softly to Julia, placing a hand gently on her arm. "Go, it's okay." She turned toward Lucas Vance and picked up the glass calmly. "I apologize, sir," she said, placing a linen cloth beneath it. "I'll have the correct wine brought out immediately." He stared at her, his eyes sharp. "Are you in charge now? You, the maid?" The insult wasn't screamed. It was whispered, cruelly, like a dagger slid between ribs. The staff froze. Elena looked up, meeting his eyes. No fear, no anger, just quiet resolve. She said, one sentence, not loud, not dramatic, but the effect was instant. Sometimes the most invisible people notice what power never sees. Silence, a deep, echoing silence that swallowed the room whole. Even the clinking of cutlery from the next table stopped. Lucas Vance blinked. Elena gently turned and walked away with the glass. Her steps measured. No tears, no faltering. The chef stepped. forward, eyes wide. Julia stood frozen near the wine rack. And the billionaire? He said nothing, because for the first time in a long time, someone had spoken truth to him, not with rage, but with dignity, and he didn't know how to respond. Words spread like fire. By the end of the night, everyone in Magnolia Hill was talking about it. Staff, kitchen, even guests. Some said they felt chills. Some said they saw his eyes soften. Just for a moment, Elena didn't stay to hear any of it. She clocked out quietly at 10:03 p.m., changed back into her faded coat, and walked home under a moonlit sky. She found her daughter already asleep, her tiny hand curled around a book. Elena kissed her forehead gently and whispered, "I'm home." But something had shifted. She didn't know it yet. But that one sentence, spoken with quiet courage, was about to ripple through lives, starting with the man who once believed nothing could touch him. The next morning, Magnolia Hill felt different. Not visibly, no. Everything still gleamed with southern elegance. The tablecloths were crisp, and the hydrangeas in the hallway hadn't lost their color. But among the staff, there was a shift, a hum beneath the surface, a tension threaded with awe, because something had happened the night before, something no one quite had words for. Elena arrived early, as always. She wore the same neatly pressed uniform and tied her dark hair back in a smooth twist. Her eyes, though heavy from too little sleep, were clear, focused. She'd tucked Ava in the night before with a story and a kiss, just like always. But somewhere between her daughter's soft breathing and her own restless thoughts, she'd replayed the moment again and again. The sentence she'd spoken, she hadn't planned it. It came from somewhere deep and quiet inside her, a place that rarely spoke. But when it did, it never lied. She thought maybe that was the end of it, that Lucas Vance would forget her, that he would sip his vintage Bordeaux elsewhere next time, surrounded by people who would never dare speak to him the way she did. That maybe, just maybe, she'd stepped too far. By 10:15 a.m., Leo, the manager, was already pacing. "Elena," he said, catching her near the coffee station. She turned. Yes, he looked nervous. "Mr. Vance is coming back." Her brow furrowed. "For dinner?" Leo shook his head. "Brunch. He made a reservation at the last minute, requested a corner table." And he hesitated, eyes flicking down to the schedule in his hands. "He asked for you, by name." For a second, Elena said nothing. Then, he remembered. "He never forgets anything," Leo muttered, adjusting his tie. "Just be careful." She nodded slowly, then walked toward the dining room, feeling every step like it carried more weight than the last. Staff whispered behind her as she passed. Julia, the young server from last night, gave her a small, grateful smile. Elena returned it with a nod. At 11:03 a.m., Lucas Vance walked in, same understated elegance. Slate gray blazer, no tie, collar slightly open, as if he still couldn't decide whether to play the part of a businessman or a man in hiding. But there was something new about him today. He looked ... unsure, not lost, not shaken, but something had cracked open. Maybe not for the world to see, but enough for her to notice. She approached quietly, hands clasped in front of her, not afraid. He looked up as she neared, and for a brief second, they simply stared at each other. Then he spoke, his voice lower than before. "You were right." She blinked. "About what?" "About what power doesn't see." There was no audience this time, no staff gathered, just the two of them in a quiet corner of a sunny room, where the light caught the rim of his water glass and refracted into soft prisms. "I wasn't trying to be right," she said softly. He looked away. "That's why you would." She didn't know how to answer that, but before she could find the words, he gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." She hesitated. "I'm not asking as a billionaire," he added. "I'm asking as a man who might have gotten used to being surrounded by silence. Except yours." Still unsure, she sat barely at the edge, ready to rise if needed. He studied her face. "Tell me something, Elena. How long have you worked here?" 6 years. "And before that, 3 other restaurants. Always service, always quiet." He nodded slowly. "You carry silence like armor." "I carry it like grace," she corrected gently. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, to her surprise, he smiled. A real one. Not wide, not charming. Just a brief flicker of something warm, trying to remember how to live on the surface of his face. "I used to build things," he said after a pause. "Software, companies. Then, I broke them. People call it disruption when you're rich. But when the dust settles, Sometimes all you've really done is ... damage. He glanced down at his hands. I came here yesterday to be invisible again, to hide in a place no one knew me, but instead I was seen, and that's more terrifying than it sounds. Alina folded her hands. Sometimes being seen is the only way we remember we're human. Do you think I forgot? I think you buried it. He leaned back, staring at her. How is it you know so much without ever speaking? She smiled slightly. You listened when I did. The rest of brunch passed with quiet conversation, nothing formal, nothing expected. She poured his coffee. He asked about her daughter. She spoke of bedtime stories and ballet shoes. He listened, but what neither of them realized, what neither could predict, was that in the shadows of the hallway, someone else was watching. One of the restaurant investors had stopped by unexpectedly. He caught the billionaire and the maid sitting together, speaking like old friends. And he didn't like what he saw, because in his world, lines were not meant to blur. Power did not bow to humility, and those who threatened the image of perfection, they had to be dealt with. By the time Alina returned to the back hallway, the wind had shifted again. A storm was brewing, but this one didn't, Rohit whispered, and sometimes whispers do more damage than thunder. She didn't know it yet, but the cost of speaking one sentence was about to rise. The next day began with a letter, folded twice, slipped into an unmarked envelope, and left on the locker room bench where Alina always changed before her shift. No name, no handwriting she recognized, just her name on the front. In perfect, mechanical print. She hesitated before opening it, her fingers brushing the paper like it might dissolve beneath her touch. A knot had already formed in her stomach, the same kind she used to feel whenever Ava came home with a bruise and wouldn't explain. Inside, the message was brief. Some people don't know their place. Stay in yours. That was all. No signature. No threat spelled out, but the threat was there, pulsing between the lines like static. Alina stood perfectly still for several seconds, the paper trembling slightly in her hand. The hum of fluorescent lights above her buzzed like a warning. Around her, laughter echoed faintly from another room. The world was moving as if nothing had changed, but something had. She folded the letter back and slipped it into her bag without a word. Then she tied her apron, smoothed her collar, and stepped back into the hallway like the woman who had not just been warned, because silence was not fear, and she would not go back into invisibility just because someone else felt threatened. By the sound of her voice, Lucas returned again that afternoon. He wasn't scheduled. No one expected him. But by now, the staff didn't even blink when his name was whispered. He had begun appearing more regularly, sometimes just for coffee, other times with a book or a laptop he never typed on. But whenever he came, he always asked for her. And each time their conversations grew softer, deeper, not romantic, not yet, but something rare, a kind of reverence that couldn't be bought or faked. She told him stories about the neighborhood where she lived, the church basement that hosted free ballet for single mothers. He asked questions no billionaire usually asked, about what it was like to be afraid of rent, or how many hours a person could work before forgetting the sound of their own name. Sometimes she caught him watching her when she thought he wasn't, not in the way men watch women, but like someone trying to understand a different language, one he wanted to speak, but never learned. But something else had changed too. The staff began treating her differently. It was in the way Leo hesitated before assigning her shifts, the way Julia looked over her shoulder more often, whispers in the break room, glances that ended in silence when she entered. And then one afternoon, she was called into the manager's office. Leo sat stiffly behind his desk, fingers steepled. I received a concern, he began, from a stakeholder, regarding your rapport with Mr. Vance. Alina raised an eyebrow. A concern? You've been seen sitting with him, talking, smiling. She waited, letting the sentence hang. Is that against policy? No, Leo said too quickly. But perception matters. You know how these circles work. Power attracts scrutiny. We just need to be careful. So, she said slowly, you're asking me to stop treating him like a human being. Leo looked away. I'm asking you to remember your place, Alina. For a moment, something old and familiar flickered in her chest. The ache of being reminded that no matter how well you carried yourself, some people only ever saw the uniform. I don't think kindness should make anyone uncomfortable, she said finally. Leo sighed. Don't make this difficult. Just ... keep your distance. She stood, noted. That evening, as the restaurant dimmed for dinner, Lucas arrived again, but Elena didn't approach his table. She served another section, moved quietly, kept her eyes low, not out of submission, but because she was choosing her moment. Lucas noticed. Midway through his coffee, he stood and walked to her, not loudly, not demanding, just calm. "You're avoiding me." Elena glanced up. "I'm protecting my job." He looked around. "Did someone say something to you?" She didn't answer. That silence said enough. Lucas's face hardened, not in anger, but in realization. "I never meant to put you in a position," he said. "But I didn't come back here for the food." She met his eyes. "I didn't speak that sentence for attention." "I know," he said quietly, "but truth has weight. It ripples, sometimes into places we don't see." She smiled faintly, "Like into the hands of people who like their power unshaken." He looked at her a long time. Then he did something unexpected. He reached into his coat and placed a small envelope on her tray. No name, no branding, just a slip of paper inside. "I was going to wait," he said, "but maybe the time for silence is over." Then he left. Later that night, alone in the locker room, Elena opened the envelope. Inside was a card with the name of a foundation she didn't recognize, and beneath it, a note in his handwriting. "For women who speak quietly but carry the world." She didn't sleep that night, because she realized something now. This wasn't just about her. Something was shifting in him, but also in her, and power. Real power doesn't come from noise. It comes from the courage to remain gentle in a room that demands you harden. What she didn't know yet was that the letter in her locker had only been the first. The next one would be worse, and the next would put everything at risk, not just her job, but her daughter's future. It arrived folded inside Ava's backpack, not slipped under a locker door this time, not placed in secret corners of her workplace, but zipped into the side pocket of her 6-year-old daughter's lunch bag, tucked between a juice box and a folded napkin with tiny strawberries printed on it. Elena didn't find it until after dinner. Ava had already fallen asleep on the couch with her ballet slippers still tied, arms curled around the stuffed giraffe Lucas had gifted the week before. When Elena pulled the paper out, her heart turned to ice. "You think you're helping your daughter, you're not. Choose carefully." No name, no fingerprints, just fear, this time reaching into the most sacred corner of her life, her child. She stood there in the quiet living room, one hand on the letter, one hand gripping the edge of the kitchen table. Her knees nearly buckled, but she didn't scream, didn't cry. She walked over, lifted Ava gently, and carried her to bed. She tucked her in as if nothing had happened, pressed a kiss to her forehead, and whispered the same promise she always did: "I will never let anyone hurt you." But her hands were shaking when she turned off the light. She knew now, someone was watching her, not just at the restaurant, not just from across the hallway, but in her real life. And whoever it was, they wanted her to disappear. The next morning, Elena walked into Magnolia Hill with her head held high. Her uniform was pristine, her shoes polished, but her spirit was on fire. Lucas arrived before lunch. She found him seated in the same corner booth, eyes already on her. She didn't ask if he knew. She didn't have to. There was something in the way his jaw was set, the faint lines near his mouth tighter than usual. "I need to talk to you," he said quietly as she approached. "I need to talk to you too." But before either of them could speak again, Leo came striding toward them with 2 other men. One wore a black suit and an earpiece. The other carried a clipboard. "Elena," Leo said carefully, "please come with us." She turned. "Why?" "We've received a formal complaint." Lucas stood. "From who?" Leo glanced at him, clearly uncomfortable. "It's not from the restaurant." The man in the suit stepped forward. "Mr. Vance, we'd like to speak to Ms. Rivera alone, if you don't mind." Lucas didn't move. "I do mind." "Elena," the man with the clipboard said, ignoring him, "we've been told you're sharing confidential information, allegedly about Mr. Vance's schedule, his whereabouts. There's concern you may be leaking it." Her mouth fell open. "What?" Lucas turned, his voice low and sharp. "That's ridiculous." The man didn't look up from his clipboard. "We just need to ask some questions." "She didn't leak anything," Lucas said flatly. "She's the only reason I keep coming back here." That sentence froze the room. Even Leo blinked. Elena's eyes flicked toward Lucas, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to, I do," he said, "because this is what they want, for you to be scared, cornered, silenced." The suited man frowned. "Sir, we don't believe you believe exactly what you were told to." Lucas snapped. But you're not going to intimidate her. Not while I'm standing here. There was silence, thick and pulsing. Then Alina turned toward the clipboard man. Her voice steady. You're accusing me of endangering someone I've only ever treated with respect. He didn't answer. You think people like me don't notice things. But we see everything because we have to. And I've seen more character in this man in 2 weeks than I've seen in others in my whole life. So if you're here to scare me, you can leave. Leo cleared his throat. Perhaps we should all just step back for now. The clipboard man handed Leo a card. We'll be in touch. Then they walked away. Lucas exhaled, slowly. They're watching me, he said. Not you, but they're using you to get to me. Because I said one sentence, she murmured. No, he said, because you were brave enough to say it where it mattered. Later that afternoon, Lucas asked to speak with her privately. They stood outside beneath the old oak trees behind the estate, where no one else could hear. The breeze lifted strands of her hair. I started something, he said. A fund. For women like you. Quiet giants. Caregivers. Fighters. She stared at him, stunned. And I want your help running it, he added. Not because I pity you, but because I trust you. Elena's voice trembled. Lucas, my whole life, I've been told to stay small, stay silent. He nodded. Not anymore. But neither of them knew that the next blow would come not from the outside, but from someone within the very walls of the restaurant, someone who had been smiling in the hallways, listening too closely, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when they did, it wouldn't just put Elena's job in jeopardy, would threaten to destroy everything Lucas was trying to rebuild. Asterisk. They called her into the office at the end of her shift. No warning, no explanation, just a message relayed through Julia, who looked pale and hesitant when she passed it along. Alina walked the long hallway toward the manager's wing, her steps quiet but unshaken. Her hands were steady, her heart was not. The door was open when she arrived. Inside sat Leo, looking tired. Across from him was someone she didn't expect to see. Claire. She had worked at Magnolia Hill for over a year, always polished, always polite. She greeted guests with the kind of practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. Alina had never disliked her, but she'd never fully trusted her either. And now, she understood why. Claire didn't look at Alina when she entered, just kept her eyes fixed on the desk in front of her, lips pressed into a hard, false line of concern. Leo cleared his throat. We need to talk. Alina nodded once. So talk. Leo leaned forward, folding his hands. A report was made this morning, from an anonymous employee, claiming you've received money from Mr. Vance in exchange for information. The words landed like stone. Elena's eyebrows pulled together. What kind of information? Details about guests, reservations, staff schedules. Leo hesitated. Including private meetings Mr. Vance held here. It was also suggested you were cultivating a relationship for financial gain. Claire didn't flinch. Her silence felt like ice. It took a long moment before Alina spoke. And you believe that? I didn't say I did, Leo replied, too quickly. You didn't have to, she said quietly. Outside the window, the sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the stone courtyard. A breeze stirred the curtains. For a heartbeat, the room held nothing but silence. Then Alina looked directly at Claire. You did this, she said softly. Didn't you? Claire still didn't look at her. You've become a distraction, she said flatly. This place isn't meant for stories. It's meant for order. You mean it's not meant for people like me? Alina replied, voice steady. Leo rubbed his temples. This is not about who you are. It's always about who someone is. Alina interrupted. You just don't want to admit it. She stood then, calm as ever, but her voice carried a quiet fire. If I were anyone else, if I came from money, wore silk instead of starched, call what Mr. Vance and I share an inspiring partnership. But because I carry trays instead of titles, it's suddenly suspicious. Claire finally looked up. You broke the illusion, she said bitterly. This place runs on appearances. You made him look human. Elena's mouth parted, but no words came. Not at first, because now she saw it. It had never been about jealousy, or status, or protocol. It was about fear. Fear that kindness could undo power. That dignity could threaten perfection. That one woman's quiet courage might shift the ground beneath an entire structure built on silence. Leo sighed. Alina, until this is resolved, I am placing you on leave. She nodded slowly. Of course you are. She walked out without another word, back through the hallway she had walked every day for 6 years, past the linen closet, past the dining room she had memorized down to every crystal reflection. Not once did she let them see her break, not until she stepped outside. There, beneath the darkening sky, she let the wind touch her face like a bomb. Her eyes closed, just for a second, then she walked home. When Ava opened the door that evening, she knew something was wrong. "Mummy," she whispered. Alina smiled gently, kneeling. "I'm okay." Ava touched her cheek. "Did someone say mean things again?" "Some people are afraid when others shine," Alina whispered. "But we don't stop shining, not ever." She didn't tell Lucas right away. She didn't want to. She needed to process it on her own, without his outrage, without his offers to fix it, because some things couldn't be fixed by power. Some things needed to be fought with truth. But Lucas found out anyway by the following morning. He was standing on her front porch, still in a suit, his tie loosened, his expression unreadable. "I heard," he said. "They suspended you." Alina nodded. "I can make one call." "No." Her voice was firm. "Let me handle this my way." He stared at her. "You shouldn't have to." She stepped closer. "I've lived a life full of shouldn't haves. This is just another one. And I'm not afraid." He looked at her with something deeper than admiration, something like awe. "I'm launching the foundation next week," he said softly. "I want you there, on stage, as a partner." Her breath caught. "Lucas, he stood up for me when you had nothing to gain. Let me stand with you now." She didn't answer right away, but in her heart, she knew. The decision had already been made, not by this moment, but by every step that had led her here. Every dish she had washed, every floor she had swept, every night she'd read Ava to sleep, while her own dreams stayed quiet. It was time for those dreams to speak. But before she could step forward, she'd have to face the final trial, because the betrayal at Magnolia Hill wasn't over, and the last person she thought would turn against her already had asterisked the invitation came wrapped in silver foil, not hand-delivered, not mailed, but slipped under Elena's apartment door sometime between dawn and breakfast. She found it when she stepped out to check the hallway, Ava still asleep, with her arms thrown across the pillow and one sock missing. She unfolded it slowly, heart steady, breath soft. The Magnolia Hill Spring Gala, a celebration of renewal. Date, time, dress code, .n at the bottom, scrawled in sharp black ink. Your silence made them comfortable. Let your truth make them tremble. She didn't need to guess who sent it. Lucas had been quiet for the past 2 days, her space, honoring her strength, but now, the pieces were aligning. He was inviting her back, not as staff, not as background, as someone who deserved to be seen. She stared at the card for a long time, her fingers trembling just slightly, not from fear, but from knowing what this night might mean. She looked down at Ava's ballet shoes on the floor, then turned toward her small closet. There wasn't much in there, some uniforms, to-work skirts, and a dress she hadn't worn in years. It was simple, navy blue, soft at the sleeves, fitted at the waist. She ran her hand over the fabric, remembering the last time she wore it. A job interview. She hadn't gotten the job, but she'd worn hope that day. Tonight, she would wear it again. The Magnolia Hill ballroom had never looked so extravagant. Candles floated in crystal bowls. Music drifted like perfume across the polished floors. Wealth shimmered in every corner. Every conversation lined with politeness and power. But when Alina stepped through the doors, everything shifted. The room didn't fall silent, but it slowed. Heads turned, voices dipped. She wasn't in a uniform. She wasn't carrying trays. She wasn't clearing tables. She was walking in like she belonged. Lucas was near the stage, speaking with a few board members. He turned the second he sensed her presence, and for the first time in days, a real smile broke across his face. He made his way toward her, brushing past silk gowns and sharp tuxedos. "I was starting to worry you wouldn't come," he said, gently. "You already knew I would," she replied, her voice soft but sure. He offered his arm. "Walk with me." She nodded, and together they moved toward the center of the room. Then came the moment she wasn't expecting. The lights dimmed, a spotlight rose over the stage, and then Lucas stepped behind the podium. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," he began, "but before we talk about partnerships or plans, I want to introduce someone who changed the way I see everything." Alina froze. "She doesn't know I'm doing this," he continued, eyes locking with hers. "But She deserves to be seen, truly seen. A ripple moved through the crowd, whispers recognition. She reminded me, Lucas said, that power without humanity is just noise, that the smallest voice, when it speaks from truth, can silence an entire room. He gestured toward her, Alina Rivera. She didn't move at first, but then, something lifted, a quiet voice inside her, the same one that spoke that night in the restaurant when he yelled and she answered, stronger than the storm. She stepped onto the stage, the spotlight followed, her heart pounded not from nerves, but from knowing what this meant. I wasn't born for microphones, she began, her voice calm, clear. I was born for rooms no one sees, 4 corners, 4 kitchens, 4 back doors. The room fell quiet. I folded napkins for people who never looked up, poured wine for men who never heard my name. But one night, someone yelled, and I answered, not to fight, but to remind them I existed. She paused. That sentence changed everything, not because it was loud, but because it was true. And sometimes, truth makes people uncomfortable. She looked out at the crowd. I lost my job for that sentence. I was accused, watched, threatened, all because I didn't stay invisible. Now, even the music had stopped. But here's what I've learned, she said. Courage isn't what happens when you're ready. It's what happens when you're not, and you speak anyway. There was a stillness. Then, quietly, one person clapped, then another, and then the whole room. Not polite applause, not charity, a rising sound, like something breaking open. Later, Lucas met her backstage. You did more than speak, he whispered. You woke them up. But there was still one moment left. One person she hadn't seen. Claire. She stood near the hallway, arms crossed, face unreadable. Elena approached her quietly. You didn't think I'd come back, Elena said. Claire looked her up and down. You weren't supposed to. Why? Claire's voice was sharp. Because you were rewriting the rules. And I followed them. Elena nodded slowly. Then maybe it's time the rules change. She didn't wait for an answer. The next day, Magnolia Hill called. Leo's voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. I owe you an apology, he said. We reviewed everything. The anonymous complaint. It was fabricated. We know who did it. She's no longer with us. Alina didn't say anything. He cleared his throat. The board would like to offer you your position back. She smiled gently. I appreciate that, she said, but I've already accepted another role. Lucas's Foundation, a voice for women who never had one. She hung up, then turned toward Ava, who sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing stars on a sheet of paper. Mummy, Ava said, looking up. Did you win? Alina knelt beside her. I didn't win, baby. I changed something. And maybe that was better, because once upon a time, a billionaire yelled in a restaurant, and a maid answered with a sentence that didn't just silence the room, it woke the world.